The rain was coming down pretty hard that Tuesday morning when David pulled into the parking lot of Prestige Auto Sales. He turned off his engine and sat there for a moment, looking at the gleaming showroom through his windshield. This was it, the dealership he'd just bought 3 days ago. His dealership now. He'd been in the car business for 15 years, working his way up from washing cars to owning 3 successful dealerships in other cities. When the previous owner called him about selling this place, David jumped at the chance. The location was perfect. The inventory was solid, but the sales numbers told a different story. Something wasn't working here, and David wanted to see it for himself before making any big changes. That's why he was dressed in old jeans and a worn jacket today. No fancy suit, no expensive watch, nothing that screamed new owner. He wanted to walk in like any regular person would and see how the staff really treated customers when nobody was watching. Sometimes you learn more in 5 minutes of honest observation than in 5 hours of formal meetings. David grabbed his phone, took a deep breath, and headed toward the entrance. The showroom was impressive, he had to admit. Shiny cars arranged perfectly under bright lights, comfortable seating areas, everything spotless. A few salespeople were chatting near the coffee station, and a couple were with customers. He walked slowly through the showroom, running his hand along the hood of a silver sedan, checking the sticker price on an SUV, just taking it all in. He'd learned over the years that you could tell a lot about a dealership by watching how the team worked. Were they pushy? Did they ignore people who looked like they were just browsing? Did they work together or compete against each other? "Can I help you find something?" David turned to see a man in his 50s approaching him. The guy had perfectly styled gray hair, an expensive suit, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His name tag read, Robert Davidson, Sales Manager. "Just looking around," David said casually. "Interesting setup you have here. How long have you been at this location?" Robert glanced at David's clothes and something shifted in his expression. The smile got a bit tighter. "We've been here for 12 years. Are you in the market for a vehicle today?" "Maybe," David said. "I'm curious about how the business runs. What's your inventory turnover like? How many units do you move in an average month?" Robert's eyebrows went up. "Those are pretty specific questions for someone who's just looking around. Are you actually here to buy a car or—" "I'm interested in the business side of things," David replied, keeping his tone friendly. "Customer satisfaction, staff training, that kind of thing. It's fascinating how dealerships operate." Robert crossed his arms. "Look, friend, I've been doing this for a long time. I can spot a browser from a mile away. If you're serious about purchasing a vehicle, I'm happy to help. But if you're just killing time or doing some kind of research project, I've got actual customers to attend to." David felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his cool. "I understand you're busy. I'm genuinely interested in learning more about this place." "Then make an appointment like everyone else," Robert said, his voice getting sharper. "Serious buyers don't just wander in off the street asking random questions about business operations." "What are you really doing here?" A younger salesperson nearby looked over, clearly uncomfortable with how Robert was handling things. She started to walk toward them, but Robert held up his hand, stopping her. David pulled out his phone, thinking he'd make a few notes about what he was seeing. This was exactly the kind of behavior that could explain the declining sales. "What are you doing?" Robert's voice rose slightly. "Are you recording this? Are you from a competing dealership trying to spy on us?" "I'm just taking notes," David said calmly. "I'm not recording anything. I don't care what you say you're doing. This is private property and I'm asking you to leave." Robert moved closer, his presence clearly meant to intimidate. "We get people like you all the time. Competitors, journalists looking for some story. People who get their kicks from wasting our time. I don't know what your angle is, but I'm not playing along." David could feel the eyes of other staff members and customers on them now. The showroom had gotten quiet. He had 2 choices: reveal who he really was right here and now, or walk away and see how this played out. "I'm not trying to cause any problems," David said evenly, "but I think you're making some assumptions that—" "The only assumption I'm making is that you're not a serious customer. You walk in here dressed like that, asking weird questions, pulling out your phone. I've been protecting this business for 8 years and I know trouble when I see it." Robert pointed toward the door. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave now." David looked at him for a long moment. There was so much he wanted to say, but this wasn't the time. He needed to see how deep this problem went, talk to the lawyers, review everything properly. "All right," David said quietly. "I'll go." He walked toward the exit, feeling Robert's eyes on his back the whole way. As he pushed through the door into the rain, he heard Robert's voice carrying across the showroom. Some people just don't understand how real business works. David sat in his car, rain drumming on the roof, and thought about what just happened. He'd been thrown out of his own dealership. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so concerning. This Robert guy was clearly a problem, but how big of a problem? And how many sales had been lost because of attitudes like his? He started his engine and pulled out of the parking lot. He had some phone calls to make and a lot to think about. But one thing was certain. Things were going to change at Prestige Auto Sales, and they were going to change soon. The next morning, Robert walked into Prestige Auto Sales feeling pretty good about himself. He'd handled that situation yesterday perfectly, or at least that's what he kept telling himself. Can't let random people waste time when there's real business to be done. He gathered the sales team for their usual morning meeting in the break room. 7 people sat around the table with their coffee looking tired. Wednesday mornings were always slow. "All right, listen up," Robert started, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. "Yesterday we had someone come in trying to scope out our operation. Casual clothes, asking weird questions about our business model, pulling out his phone. I had to escort him out. A few people nodded, but Kelly, one of the senior salespeople who'd been there for 5 years, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "The thing is," Kelly said carefully, "I overheard some of his questions. He was asking about inventory turnover and customer satisfaction ratings. Those aren't really typical competitor questions. They sounded more like owner questions, if you know what I mean." Robert laughed, but it came out harsher than he intended. "Owner questions?" "Kelly, the guy looked like he just rolled out of bed. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. I've been managing this place longer than some of you have been selling cars. I'm just saying, maybe we should have what? Let some stranger wander around asking intrusive questions? No way. That's how dealerships get into trouble." Robert looked around the table. "Anyone else have concerns about how I handled it?" Nobody spoke up. A couple of people stared at their coffee cups. "Good. Now let's talk about this week's numbers. We're down 15% from last month, and that's not acceptable." After the meeting ended, Kelly stayed behind while everyone else filtered out to the showroom floor. "Robert, can I ask you something? Make it quick."
"I've got paperwork. Don't you think it's strange that the old owner sold so suddenly?"
"And nobody's told us who bought the place. Usually there's some kind of announcement." Robert waved his hand dismissively. "That's corporate stuff. Above our pay grade. When the new owner shows up, they'll show up. Until then, we keep doing what we're doing." Kelly wanted to say more, but she could tell Robert wasn't interested in hearing it. She headed back to her desk, that uncomfortable feeling still sitting in her stomach. Meanwhile, across town, David was sitting in a conference room with his attorney, Linda, and his business consultant, Pete. Spread across the table were financial reports, employee files, and incident logs from the past 3 years. "It's worse than I thought," David said, rubbing his temples. "Look at these customer complaint forms. Half of them mention Robert specifically. Felt judged based on appearance. Manager was dismissive and rude. Assumed I couldn't afford a vehicle before even talking to me." Linda flipped through another stack of papers. "The employee turnover is concerning too. You've lost 12 salespeople in the last 18 months. Most of them left within 6 months of being hired." "What are the exit interview notes saying?" David asked. Pete found the file. "Most of them cite management style as the primary reason for leaving. They use words like hostile, judgmental, which creates unnecessary competition between staff. One person wrote that Robert actively discouraged them from spending time with customers who didn't look wealthy enough." David shook his head. "You know what kills me? This dealership has premium inventory, perfect location, great financing options. It should be crushing the competition. Instead, it's barely staying afloat." "What do you want to do about Robert?" Linda asked. "I need to see more. Yesterday was just one incident. I want to understand the full scope of the problem before I make any decisions." David pulled out his phone and showed them the security footage from his visit. "I had the security company send me this last night. Watch how he sizes me up the second he sees my clothes." They watched the footage in silence. You could see it clearly. The way Robert's expression changed, the body language shift, the escalation. "He's done this before," Pete said quietly. "That's not someone having a bad day. That's a pattern." David nodded. I'm going to run one more test. I want to see if this is just about me, or if this is how they treat people in general. That afternoon, back at the dealership, a man in his 60s walked in wearing work boots, dusty jeans, and a flannel shirt. His name was Mr. Peterson, and he'd been buying cars from Prestige Auto Sales for almost 10 years. He'd just finished his shift at the construction company he'd worked at for 35 years, and he was ready to buy his fourth vehicle from them. Robert looked up from his desk when Mr. Peterson walked in. He recognized him vaguely but couldn't remember from where. Instead of getting up himself, he called over to Travis, their newest and youngest salesperson. Travis, you take this one. Travis looked confused. Shouldn't Kelly handle it? She usually works with the repeat customers. Kelly's busy. You need the practice, go. Mr. Peterson waited patiently by a truck he was interested in. He'd saved up $15,000 for a down payment and had already been pre-approved for financing through his credit union. This should be a quick, easy sale, but Travis was nervous and inexperienced. He stumbled through the presentation, forgot to check if Mr. Peterson was in their system, and didn't ask the right qualifying questions. After 20 minutes, Mr. Peterson politely excused himself, saying he'd think about it and come back later. Kelly watched this happen from her desk, frustrated. She knew Mr. Peterson. She'd sold him his last 2 vehicles. She walked over to Robert's office. Why didn't you let me help Mr. Peterson? He's a loyal customer. Robert barely looked up from his computer. Who? The gentleman who just left. He's bought multiple cars from us. Always pays on time, always refers his friends. He was ready to buy today. The guy in the work clothes. How was I supposed to know he was a serious buyer? He looked like he just came from a job site. He did come from a job site. Because he works for a living. And now he probably won't come back because we made him feel like we didn't care about his business. Robert finally looked at her. Kelly, you're overthinking this. If he's a real customer, he'll be back. And maybe next time he'll dress appropriately. Kelly stared at him for a moment, then walked away. She pulled out her phone and started updating her resume. She was done. David received a call from his friend Tom that evening. Tom had been the one playing Mr. Peterson, and he gave David a full report of what happened. Yeah, it's exactly what you thought, Tom said. The manager barely acknowledged me. Passed me off to some kid who didn't know what he was doing. I felt like they were doing me a favor just by talking to me. David thanked him and hung up. He sat in his home office looking out the window as the sun set. Tomorrow was going to be an interesting day. Tomorrow, everyone at Prestige Auto Sales was going to learn who really owned the place. Thursday morning started like any other day at Prestige Auto Sales. Robert was in his office going through emails when his assistant, Monica, knocked on the door. She looked nervous, which wasn't like her. Robert, there are some people here. They're asking for an emergency staff meeting. Everyone needs to go to the conference room right now. Robert looked up, annoyed. What people? I didn't schedule any meeting. I don't know who they are, but they said it's urgent. The tall guy in the suit said something about new ownership. Robert's stomach dropped a little, but he quickly recovered. New ownership. Finally. Probably just some corporate types coming to introduce themselves and tell everyone to keep doing what they're doing. He'd dealt with ownership changes before. Fine. Tell everyone to head to the conference room. I'll be there in a minute. He straightened his tie, grabbed his coffee, and walked down the hallway with confidence. Whatever this was, he'd handle it. He was good at first impressions with management. When he pushed open the conference room door, he saw about 8 staff members already seated. At the head of the table sat a man in an expensive navy suit looking at some papers. Next to him was a woman with a briefcase who had attorney written all over her. And on the other side, Robert froze. It was him, the guy from Tuesday. The one in the old jeans and worn jacket who'd been asking all those questions. Except now he was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Robert made in a month. And he was sitting at the head of the table like he owned the place. Because apparently, he did. Please, everyone take a seat, the woman said. We'll start once everyone's here. Robert felt his legs moving, but he couldn't feel his feet. He sat down in the nearest chair, his mind racing. No way. This couldn't be happening. The rest of the staff filed in over the next few minutes. Kelly came in and immediately noticed the man at the head of the table. Her eyes went wide and she glanced at Robert. Even she could tell something big was about to happen. Once everyone was seated, the woman stood up. Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Chen, and I'm the attorney for Mr. David Morrison. I'll let him introduce himself. David stood up and looked around the room. His expression was calm, professional, but his eyes were sharp. Thank you all for gathering on short notice. I know this is unusual, but I wanted to meet with everyone as soon as possible. As of last Friday, I am the new owner of Prestige Auto Sales. A few people gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh no," under their breath. Kelly put her hand over her mouth. Robert felt like he was going to be sick. I've been in the automotive business for 15 years, David continued. I've owned and operated 3 other dealerships, all of which have been successful because we focus on one simple principle: treat every single person who walks through the door with respect. He paused and let that sink in. Before I officially took over, I wanted to get a real sense of how this place operates. Not the version you show when the boss is watching, but the real day-to-day culture. So I came in a few days ago, dressed casually, just to observe and ask some questions. The room was completely silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. I was thrown out within 15 minutes. Several staff members looked down at the table. A couple of them glanced at Robert, who was staring straight ahead, his face pale. Now, I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone, David said, and his tone was surprisingly gentle. I'm telling you because it revealed something important about the culture here. And that culture is going to change starting today. He pulled out a folder and opened it. Over the past 3 years, this dealership has received over 40 customer complaints. Most of them have a similar theme: customers feeling judged, dismissed, or ignored based on how they looked. We've also lost 12 employees in 18 months, most citing problems with management style. David looked directly at Robert now. I've also learned that we're turning away business because we're making assumptions about people based on their appearance. Yesterday, a loyal customer who's purchased multiple vehicles from us walked in and was essentially ignored because he was wearing work clothes. Kelly couldn't help herself. Mr. Peterson, she said quietly. That's right, David nodded. Mr. Peterson, who, by the way, was ready to buy a truck yesterday with a substantial down payment. He left instead. That's a sale we lost because someone decided he didn't look like he belonged here. Robert finally found his voice. I didn't know. I was protecting the business. You thought you could tell who's a serious customer by looking at them, David interrupted, but his tone wasn't angry. It was disappointed, which somehow felt worse. Robert, I've been in this business long enough to know that some of the biggest sales I've ever made were to people who walked in wearing sweatpants. Some of my best customers are people who work with their hands and come straight from job sites. He walked around the table slowly, making eye contact with each person. Here's what a lot of people don't understand about the car business. You can't judge a customer by their clothes. The woman in scrubs might be a surgeon. The guy in the work boots might own a construction company. The young person in jeans might have just inherited money from their grandparents. You just don't know. Travis, the young salesperson, raised his hand tentatively. So what happens now? David smiled a little. Now we start fresh. I'm implementing new training for everyone on customer service and eliminating bias. Every person who walks through that door gets greeted within 60 seconds. Every question gets a real answer. Every customer gets treated like they matter because they do. He turned back to Robert. Robert, I need to speak with you privately after this meeting. Everyone else, I want you to know that I'm excited to work with you. I've looked at your individual sales records and most of you are doing great work. I just want to help you do even better. The meeting wrapped up a few minutes later and people filed out quietly. Some looked relieved. Others looked excited. Kelly caught David's eye as she left and mouthed, "Thank you." Soon it was just David, Linda, and Robert in the conference room. Robert stood up, his hands shaking slightly. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. If I had known... That's exactly the problem, David said, sitting down and gesturing for Robert to sit too. You treated me badly because you didn't think I was important. But every customer is important. Every person deserves respect, whether they're the owner or someone buying their first car. Robert sat down heavily. What are you going to do, fire me? David opened another folder, this one thicker. I've been reviewing your performance. The complaints, the turnover, the lost sales. It's a pattern, Robert. And patterns don't change overnight. I can change. I can do better. Maybe you can, David said. But here's what I'm offering you. You can step down as manager and take a position as a regular salesperson. You'll go through the same training as everyone else. You'll start fresh, no special treatment. If you can prove that you've learned and changed, we can talk about moving up again in 6 months. Robert's face flushed red. You want me to take a demotion? After 8 years as manager? The other option is resignation with a basic severance package. Your choice. Robert stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need time to think about this. Take until tomorrow morning, David said. But Robert, understand this. Either way, the culture here is changing. The question is whether you want to be part of that change or not. Robert walked out without another word, leaving David and Linda alone in the conference room. That went better than I expected, Linda said. David leaned back in his chair and sighed. The hard part's just beginning. Changing a culture is harder than changing a policy, but we'll get there. He looked out the window at the showroom floor, watching his team get back to work. We'll get there. Robert didn't sleep that night. He kept replaying the meeting in his head, feeling that hot rush of embarrassment every time he remembered the moment he'd recognized David. The guy he'd thrown out was now his boss. Worse than that, he was being offered a demotion. 8 years. 8 years he'd been running that dealership. Sure, maybe he'd been a bit harsh sometimes, but someone had to protect the business. Someone had to make the tough calls. That's what managers did, right? But then he'd think about Mr. Peterson walking out yesterday, and that woman last month who'd left after he'd barely acknowledged her, only to find out later she'd bought a luxury SUV from their competitor the same day, and the young couple he'd dismissed as just looking, who apparently had excellent credit and cash for a down payment. Maybe David had a point. By Friday morning, Robert still hadn't made up his mind. He drove to the dealership early before anyone else arrived and sat in his car in the parking lot. He watched the sun come up over the building, this place that had been such a big part of his life. His phone rang. It was his daughter, calling from college. Hey, Dad, just wanted to check in. How's work? Robert almost told her everything, but he stopped himself. It's complicated right now, sweetheart. What happened? He sighed. New owner. Some changes coming. I might not be manager anymore. There was a pause. Is this about that thing you told me last year? When you said you could always tell who was serious about buying and who wasn't. What do you mean? Dad, you literally told me you judge people by their shoes. You said expensive shoes meant real buyers. I told you that was messed up, remember? Robert did remember. He'd laughed it off at the time. I was just trying to be efficient with my time. Dad, I work retail while I'm in school. You know what I've learned? The people who look like they have money sometimes just try stuff on and leave. The people in regular clothes are sometimes the ones who actually buy things. You can't tell just by looking. After they hung up, Robert sat there for a long time. His own daughter had tried to tell him, and he hadn't listened. He got out of the car and walked inside. David was already there, in what used to be Robert's office, going through files. I'll take the sales position, Robert said from the doorway. David looked up, surprised. You sure? It's a big change, I'm sure. But I want you to know something. I wasn't trying to be mean to people. I really thought I was doing the right thing for the business. I believe you, David said, and he seemed to mean it. That's why I'm giving you this chance. But Robert, you've got to be willing to really change. Not just say the right things, but actually see people differently. I know. My daughter actually called this morning and basically told me I've been an idiot. David smiled a little. Smart kid. Yeah, she is. Robert took a deep breath. So what now? Now you start over. Kelly's going to be the new manager. You'll report to her along with everyone else. Training starts Monday for the whole team. And Robert, leave your ego at the door. This only works if you're genuinely willing to learn. Robert nodded and left the office. It stung reporting to Kelly. She was a good salesperson, sure, but she'd only been there 5 years. But maybe that was the point. Maybe he needed to feel what it was like to start from the bottom again. Later that morning, David called an all-staff meeting in the showroom. When everyone gathered, he noticed Robert standing in the back, looking uncomfortable but present. I want to thank everyone for being flexible during this transition, David began. I know change is hard, but I promise you, these changes are going to make things better for everyone. Better for you, better for our customers, and better for the business. He gestured to Kelly. I'm promoting Kelly to sales manager, effective immediately. She's demonstrated exactly the kind of customer-focused approach we want to build this dealership around. Kelly looked shocked but pleased. A few people clapped. Robert has decided to stay on as part of the sales team, and I respect that decision. It takes courage to start over. Robert felt people looking at him, but he kept his eyes forward. David continued. Starting Monday, everyone's going through training. We're going to learn about implicit bias, customer service, and why first impressions can be deceiving. But more importantly, we're going to learn to see every person who walks through that door as someone who deserves our time and respect. Travis, the young salesperson, raised his hand. What if we make mistakes? Like, what if we accidentally judge someone wrong? Then you apologize and do better next time, David said simply. Nobody's perfect. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for effort and genuine care. Over the next few days, David watched the team carefully. Some people adapted quickly to the new approach. Others struggled a bit but were trying. And Robert? Well, Robert was quiet, but he showed up on time and paid attention during the training sessions. The real test came on Tuesday afternoon. A woman walked in wearing yoga pants and a hoodie, hair in a messy ponytail looking like she'd just come from the gym. The old Robert would have written her off immediately. Kelly was about to approach her, but David quietly gestured to Robert. Your turn. Robert hesitated, then walked over with what he hoped was a genuine smile. Good afternoon. Welcome to Prestige Auto Sales. Is there anything specific I can help you find today? The woman smiled back. Actually, yes. I'm looking for a reliable SUV, something good in snow. I just moved here from California for work. Great. What kind of work do you do, if you don't mind me asking? It helps me understand what features might be important for you. I'm a software engineer. Just got hired at a tech company downtown. I've been saving for a while and I'm ready to buy something nice. Robert spent the next 45 minutes really listening to her. Not judging, not assuming, just listening. She test drove 2 vehicles, asked smart questions about safety features and warranty coverage, and when they sat down to talk numbers, she had a pre-approval letter from her bank for $70,000. 2 hours later, she drove off the lot in a brand new SUV, and Robert had made his first sale as a regular salesperson in 8 years. David caught up with him as he was finishing the paperwork. How'd it feel? Robert looked up, and there was something different in his expression, something softer. Honestly, it felt good. Really good. She told me I was the first person at any dealership who actually listened to what she wanted instead of trying to upsell her on something flashy. That's how it's supposed to. Works, I know that now. Robert paused. I wasted a lot of time judging people. Probably cost the dealership a lot of money. Definitely drove away good customers. But you're learning. That's what matters. As David walked back to his office, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just for the dealership, but for the people working there. Change was possible, even for someone like Robert who'd been stuck in his ways for so long. Kelly stopped by his office before leaving for the day. I saw what happened with Robert and that customer. I have to admit, I didn't think he'd actually change. People can surprise you, David said. Sometimes they just need someone to believe they can be better. Is that why you gave him a second chance instead of just firing him? David smiled. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow, even the people who throw you out of your own dealership. 3 months later, Prestige Auto Sales looked different. Not physically. The cars were still shiny, the showroom still clean, but there was a different energy in the place. People smiled more. Customers stayed longer. And the numbers told their own story. David was in his office early one Saturday morning when Kelly knocked on his door. Got a minute? I want to show you something. She spread out the quarterly sales report on his desk. Look at this. We're up 42% from last quarter. Customer satisfaction scores went from 68% to 93%. And we haven't lost a single employee since you took over. David looked at the numbers, genuinely pleased. This is great work, Kelly. You've done an amazing job as manager. It's not just me. It's the whole team. People actually want to come to work now. They're not scared of making mistakes or being yelled at for spending too much time with the wrong customers. She paused. Even Robert's doing well. Really well, actually. As if on cue, Robert appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, David. There's someone here asking for you specifically. They walked out to the showroom and there was Mr. Peterson, the construction worker who'd walked out 3 months ago. He was still in his work clothes, still had dust on his boots, but this time he was smiling. Mr. Morrison, I'm Tom Peterson. I don't know if you remember, but I came in here a few months back and had a pretty lousy experience. David shook his hand warmly. I remember. And please call me David. I owe you an apology for how you were treated. Actually, that's why I'm here. My buddy told me things have changed around here. Said his wife bought a car last month and was treated like royalty, even though she came in straight from her nursing shift. So I figured I'd give you guys another shot. We'd be honored to help you. Robert, would you mind working with Mr. Peterson? For a split second, Robert looked uncertain, but then he stepped forward. Mr. Peterson, I actually remember you from last time. I'm the one who messed up and didn't give you the attention you deserved. I'd really like a chance to make that right if you'll let me. Tom studied Robert's face, saw something genuine there, and nodded. All right. Let's see what you've got. David watched them walk toward the truck section, and Kelly came up beside him. Did you plan that? Not at all. But I'm glad it happened this way. An hour later, Robert and Tom were shaking hands over the hood of a truck. The paperwork was done, the deal was signed, and Tom was $15,000 down on a vehicle he'd been wanting for months. You know, Tom said as Robert handed him the keys. You're completely different from the guy I dealt with last time. What changed? Robert thought about it. Honestly, I got knocked down a few pegs and realized I'd been wrong about a lot of things. Turns out you can't judge a person by what they're wearing or where they came from. You actually have to talk to them, listen to them, treat them like human beings. Tom laughed. Sounds like common sense. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Robert smiled. But sometimes we need to learn the hard way. As Tom drove off in his new truck, Robert walked back inside feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Pride in his work. Real, genuine pride. Not the fake confidence he'd been carrying around before. The day continued with its usual rhythm. A young couple came in, both in jeans and college sweatshirts, and Travis spent 2 hours helping them find a reliable used car within their budget. He didn't pressure them, didn't judge them for not buying new, just helped them find what they needed. A woman in an expensive suit came in during her lunch break and ended up working with Kelly. She bought a modest sedan, not the luxury model Kelly showed her first, because it was more practical for her needs. Kelly didn't try to upsell her. She just listened. Around 3 in the afternoon, a man walked in wearing paint-splattered overalls. He looked around nervously like he was expecting to be kicked out any second. Robert noticed and walked over immediately. Afternoon. Welcome to Prestige Auto, I'm Robert. What brings you in today? The man relaxed a little. I'm actually looking for something for my daughter. She just graduated from medical school and I want to surprise her with a reliable car. Nothing too fancy, just something safe. That's wonderful. Congratulations to her. Let's find something perfect. They spent the next hour looking at options, and Robert learned that this man was a house painter who'd worked 3 jobs to put his daughter through school. By the time they were done, the man had put a down payment on a certified pre-owned sedan with excellent safety ratings. As Robert walked him out, the man stopped and said, You know, I almost didn't come in. I've been to 4 other dealerships this week, and every single one made me feel like I didn't belong. Like my money wasn't good enough because I wasn't wearing a suit. Thank you for treating me like I matter. You do matter, Robert said simply, and your daughter's lucky to have you. After the man left, Robert sat at his desk for a minute thinking about who he used to be. The guy who would have judged that painter, who would have assumed he couldn't afford anything, who would have wasted both their time with his assumptions. David stopped by his desk. Good sale? Great sale. But more than that, I think I finally get it. What you've been trying to teach us. What's that? Every person has a story. Every person deserves respect, and our job isn't to judge who belongs here. Our job is to make everyone feel like they belong here. David smiled. Took you a while, but you got there. Better late than never, right? That evening, after everyone had gone home, David stood in the empty showroom and looked around. He thought about that day 3 months ago when Robert had thrown him out. At the time, it had been frustrating, embarrassing even, but it had also shown him exactly what needed to change. He pulled out his phone and took a picture of the new sign he'd installed near the entrance. It was simple, just a few words in clean lettering. Everyone welcome. No exceptions. Some of his colleagues had told him he was crazy to keep Robert on staff, that he should have just fired him and started fresh. But David believed in second chances. He believed people could change if you gave them the right environment and the right motivation. And the numbers proved him right. Higher sales, happier customers, better team morale. All because they'd committed to one simple principle: treat people with respect. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Kelly with a screenshot of a 5-star review from Mr. Peterson. Best car buying experience of my life. Finally found a dealership that values all customers, not just the ones who look wealthy. Special shout out to Robert for his patience and honesty. David forwarded it to Robert with a simple message. Proud of you. A minute later, Robert replied, Thank you for not giving up on me. David locked up the dealership and headed to his car. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new customers, new opportunities to prove that doing business with integrity actually worked. But tonight he'd take a moment to appreciate how far they'd come. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about selling cars. It was about treating people right, giving second chances, and building something better. One customer, one conversation, one moment of genuine respect at a time. And that, David thought as he drove home, was worth more than any sales record could ever show.